Welcome, everyone, to the Garden of Thought on our premiere episode on the Sports Jedi Network. And we're already having technical difficulties. No, we're not. It's not technical, it's human difficulties. And the human that's difficult is me, who told everyone that the show is starting at 1, although I scheduled it for noon with the guests. So that's all on me. But thank you to the Sports Jedi Network for hosting us. And we're this should be a lot of fun to have the show live and on all the platforms, YouTube, X. I think they're on Twitch and whatever. Kevin's in the back there, so he can correct. I'm sure it's in the show notes where everyone can find it, and the audio will still be there like it always is. Our guest this week, or this episode, is a returning guest, Professor Michael York, who's coming to us from the south of France, not too far from Saint Tropez, but fancy enough. How are you, Professor?
I'm fine, just fine. Very hot. It's very, very hot. It's 95 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yuck, you're still in that heat wave over there in Europe, huh?
Yep.
Okay. What is that Celsius? Is that like 50?
Celsius, it's 35.
35. I would. The conversion is very difficult for me. Anyway, Professor York has been on this show several times before. I mean, I don't know if we're in double digits yet, but we're approaching that. This is probably your 7th or 8th.
Yeah.
And it's probably the best for you to tell the good people who you are.
Who am I? I am a professor of cultural astronomy and astrology. I've been retired for a number of years now. I live in the south of France mostly, the winters in London. My area, well, I'm a sociologist, and I was a sociologist of new religious movements. My interest is in Indo European studies, understanding who we all came from culturally, linguistically, and what relevance that understanding of the past may have with us today and moving forward.
Oh, I think the answer to that is it certainly does have relevance today, and I imagine any longtime listeners of the show certainly agree, and I hope new ones will too. So today's topic is the Hittites, but mostly the pantheon of the Hittites, and even more specifically, something I didn't realize, which is why it's a show about the Hittites. Because I mean, there are people who are both historically validated, and they're biblical, and that's not that those two things don't always match. But what I didn't know is that the Hittites was considered the land of 1,000 gods, and that in and of itself isn't unusual to have 1,000 gods in your pantheon. I mean, anyone who's read Greek mythology and all the plays and whatever. I mean, there's nymphs and demigods and this, that, the other thing, and the Indian pantheon has 33 million gods, which again, I don't think that anyone actually wrote that down. I don't think even Aristotle could do that catalog. But I was wondering, what's the deal with the land of 1,000 gods? So we will get there, but I have a couple of real basic questions. Who were the Hittites? Where were the Hittites? And when were the Hittites?
Okay, the Hittites arrived in Anatolia probably around 3000 BC. They formed the earliest political unit of an Indo European peoples. They arrived. There's two ideas of where they came from. They arrived either from the northwest, followed by another Anatolian speaking peoples, the Luwians, or they arrived from the northeast and encountered the Luwians already in Anatolia.
Who are the Luwians? I'm sorry to get sidetracked already, but you did ask me to ask questions.
Yes, I did ask you that. The Luwians and the Pelasgians are two other branches of the Anatolian linguistic family.
And Anatolia, to be clear, is modern-day Turkey or part of modern-day Turkey?
probably no longer, but that's where they were settled. And there again, there's so little known about, especially the other two, the Luwians and the Palaeans. Um, they may have become the sea peoples
Oh,
that, and especially after the volcano of Terra, Santorini. And so the sea peoples may have become the Etruscans in Italy, as well as the Philistines in Canaan, Israel. And they also did go to Egypt too, and one of the dynasties was formed by the sea people. So but the Hittites themselves, they created their New Kingdom empire in the 14th and 13th centuries before Christ, and it was finally destroyed in the around 1225 BC. What is interesting about Anatolia is we have some of our earliest civilizations, and so in the 6th to the 7th century, or 6th to 7th century millennium BC, you had this one place called the Satel Huyuk on the Konya Plain. It was probably its uppermost level of that site dates to around 5720 BC. And we have one of our earliest archaeological finds and mysteries. We have a lion-flanked female figure who is either giving birth or is the earliest known representation of a hermaphroditic female. And that ultimately becomes significant because when we look at the origins of Indo European speaking peoples, they had two understandings of the goddess or the feminine spirituality. One we could just basically classify as personification of the earth mother, the earth goddess. But we also have a more cosmic celestial figure who isn't necessarily positive. And so this figure that we have from Satel Huyuk could either be like the Vedic earth mother, Prithvi, who's giving birth, or it could be an appendage of the Vedic cosmic mother, Aditi, who actually gave birth to the enemies of the gods. That's a whole other thing. So the Hittites inherit a lot of that. They are Indo-Europeans. They have that kind of dichotomy between what we could call the divine. I use the word Assyrian for the anti-divine because the Vedics knew the figures as Asuras. They were called Ahuras in Iran or Persia, and they were probably cognate and the same figures as the Aesir among the Norse peoples.
the Asgardians, or the Aesir.
Yes, they become. I mean, we're not going to go into the whole Nordic thing.
No, we don't have time for that today. Though I'm wondering, are there any people who study the veneer, not just the Aesir? Because I mean, we have, it's probably a topic for another show, but I'm not even sure if there's enough knowledge to do a show about it.
No, I think more and more there are, and Terry Gunnell from University of Iceland, I would say, is kind of a leading figure in that area. And he understood how the Aesir, through Odin, are later figures that came up from the aristocracy of Northern Europe, Germany.
And let me do a little bit of framing for the audience who's probably more on my level than on your level. So Indo European is a linguistic group. It's not and because of that there's cultural similarities, but it's not like it's all the people look the same. And it's just what Indo is, like India, the Indus Valley, and European, and all, a lot that goes between it. And that linguistic group is the basis for a lot of the languages that you recognize today, but wouldn't necessarily recognize them as being related. So Indians, what do I say? Gujarati, is that the main language in India?
Hindi is the main
Hindi?
language, which derives from Sanskrit, which derives from Vedic. And so the Vedic peoples are the earliest Indo European peoples that came into the subcontinent. You mentioned the pre-Indus Valley, but they were possibly Dravidian. We don't know exactly what language or what peoples they were, and it's now controversial. We basically the Indo-Europeans probably originated in Kazakhstan, that area, and that's Maria Gimbutas's theory, and it seems to be the one that's most supported. And they disseminated. They had horses, so they could conquer. They went both east and west. The eastern ones basically settled in Iran, Persia, and ultimately at least the northern part of the Indian subcontinent. There was another little group that went to China, the Tokharians, but the bulk of them went west. And probably the Indo-European, the Hittites were the vanguard of the Indo-Europeans coming west. At least they were the most organized, have formed a political unit, a political state. The others were much later.
Well, it sounds like they came from Eurasia, went into Europe, and then went down southeast into Anatolia, maybe, but they might have come from Russia, Ukraine, Georgia, Belarus, that sort of area down there,
That's
and
one of the
intermixed
theories.
with.
Otherwise, they came through probably from Greece, coming northwest into Anatolia. There's the two.
Okay.
There's the two considerations.
And it could be a combination of all of the above, and heaven knows when this transition started, but it was certainly between 10 and 5,000 years ago, which is a lot of time. But I heard you say that they started the first basic polity in Anatolia 3000 BC, which is about 5,000 years ago, which is old. So that tells us who they were, where they were, and probably that they were more Eurasian than, say, Persian or Indian, but who knows, really, I guess. Do we know who their root gods were? The Hittites pantheon, and I know too when you say original pantheon, nothing's as simple as that. But if they had like a sort of a famous pantheon like the Olympians, like the 12 or whatever, who were some examples of that, or at least what did they represent? And we'll start with the Hittite pantheon, and then we can figure out how it became the land of 1,000 gods.
All right. I would say yes, they do have figures that we can identify through the Greeks, the Romans, and so forth, and the Vedic peoples. What becomes most confusing is that they basically adopted the myths and cults of their Hattian-speaking predecessors. And then they were very strongly influenced by the Hurrian east to southeast neighbors. So they're very much influenced. They were Caucasian. These
are the Hurrians the same as the Hyksos?
No.
No.
The Hyksos, isn't that was that the name of the dynasty or the peoples in Egypt?
Yeah, but I thought they came from somewhere in Anatolia, the Levant, into Egypt, sort of as a invading force, but they were sort of Scythian in nature, or at least in fighting style and equipment, which of course is Indo-European.
The Scythians are Indo-European. No, the Hurrians and the Hattians are probably Caucasian peoples, probably related to the Sumerians, who precede the Akkadians in Mesopotamia.
And Akkadians the Akkadians from Akka. which is sort of Assyrian and Babylonian
Yep,
depending on the
yep,
time.
yep, exactly. So they're Canaanites, they're Syrians, they're Babylonians, Assyrians. Those are all the Semitic, Mesopotamian speaking peoples.
Right.
And
And Semitic's a different language group. So again, I want to be able to clear these are language groups, but not necessarily distinct cultural groups, and they're very close to each other. So there's a lot of cultural and
there's a lot of
religious exchange
yeah, hmm yeah.
and
So
borrowing.
so that's all right. That's what makes it difficult because the Hittites use the names of their neighboring, especially the Levantine figures, very often, and so we're not always sure what the names of their deities were. Plus, they also used
So
the
you think that maybe, or do scholars believe that maybe that it wasn't really a thousand gods? It was just they were using the local names for their gods, and
yeah.
in
I've
other
never
words,
heard
sort of reverse
thousand gods.
assimilation.
I've
Like I
never
know
heard
that the
this.
Romans sort of followed the same model. They're like, have your own gods, but call them Zeus. Well, with the
Yeah,
Romans, they say call it Jupiter or whatever. It sounds like the Hittites said, follow your own gods. We don't care. It's close enough to our God,
yeah.
and we'll make them part of our world. So we don't have just one storm god. We have 24 storm gods.
And you could recognize your key figures with the key figures of your neighboring cultures, and then be influenced by their myths, their rituals, and so forth. So that's the Hittites, in this sense, are really very fluid, culturally speaking. It's hard to just specify what is exactly Hittite as opposed to Hurrian and Hattian, and ultimately Levantine, Canaanite, and Mesopotamian.
It's kind
Um,
of strange because we know them, well, most of we know them from hearing one of those peoples in the Bible that were sort of battling with the Israelites.
mhm.
And I'm sure they battled with plenty others, famously the Egyptians. So you don't necessarily think of that and think of an accommodating people, but it sounds like they were actually fairly accommodating on that. And I guess that's a philosophy for expansion with, I don't know if it's peaceful expansion or hearts and minds after warful expansion or a combination of both, but is that typical of Indo European in the region, or just
Well,
all peoples in the region?
it was typical of the Romans. I guess actually the Hellenistic peoples following Alexander the Great, they identified local deities with their deities of their own pantheon, and so it was both a political maneuver, but it tended to work. They weren't fighting these people. It was only really with the Israelis who had their own god, who was opposed to all the other various goddesses and gods and goddesses of the polytheistic pantheons.
Well, it's the first
And
commandment. There shall, well, which
yep,
maybe didn't exist yet, but there shall be
exactly.
no other God before me.
So the Hittites ultimately were replaced by Phrygian invaders, another Indo-European speaking peoples who came in from Southeast Europe.
And also
Uh,
people that are representing Castle Transylvania for those anime fans. So you kids, I'm hip.
and so, all right. So what
Wait,
the
that's like my
French?
last nonsensical thing for the moment. Wasn't King Midas supposed to be from Phrygia?
I think he was Phrygian.
Guy that turned everything to gold,
Yep, yep.
then
But
like turned his
through
children to gold or something like that accidentally. It's like whoops.
yeah, anything he touched. I mean,
Oh,
so even his food. Um, uh, Through the Phrygians, via the Hittites, through the Phrygians, gave to the Greeks the figures of Zemelo, who we understand as Semele, which is actually means earth, so it's the earth goddess. They gave us the figure Sabazius, who became identified probably with Dionysus. We also got the sanguinarian. We don't know what her name was. It's an ideogram. M.A. is how she's represented, um, and she seems to be a predecessor of the originally bisexual Agdistis or Cybele, who ultimately was imported to Rome and then forbidden by the Romans because she was too much this anti-cosmic celestial figure who, her followers had to castrate themselves. I mean, it was
Ooh,
all kind of going against the whole natural flow of things. And
yeah.
so you can always uncover this kind of dichotomy and strife between nature-oriented uh, figures, deities, and
Castration
these
was a
kind of
punishment. And unless you're in a cult, and like the Hellbot
yeah,
people, didn't they sort of castrate and neuter themselves?
yep, yep. I mean, they went into frenzied dancing and then culminated by castrating themselves. So, um,
What better way to castrate yourself other than lead off with a frenzy
yes,
dance?
that I guess that's
We
what
can all
led them
agree
up.
on that.
Yeah. Yes. All right. So let me try to explain the Levantine Anatolian myths. You basically have three types. You have your cosmogonic, which really is explaining the origins, the changes and cycles of the world order. You have also what are known as transition myths, which are chiefly of adventures of the adventures of mortal heroes, um, and also tales consequent on the world order. And then thirdly, you have what are known as disruption rectification myths. And these would include dragon fights, the disappearance of a leading god. In other words, a break in the world order in which the original order had to be restored. And that's a very common theme in Indo European mythology itself, which the Hittites inherit that and they pass that on to the Greeks. Um, so the disruption rectification myths are chiefly Hattic, or at least recorded in the Hattic language, and they're tales that are connected with rituals that seek to restore the original balance. Um, if they have rituals for erecting a new palace, which is kind of a microcosmogonic uh, ritual, which is extending the continued welfare of the state and the ruler on a local level. Now, the deities, the chief deity of the Hittites is known as the sun goddess of Arinna. Arinna, we think, means the earth. She is foremost and originally a netherworld divinity. And her name, I think her name would be Aridnu, and she probably comes into Greek myth as the goddess Ariadne, the
Oh,
lover and ultimate wife of Dionysus. And Dionysus, his name itself,
wasn't she with Theseus also?
well, she was at first, yes, she helped Theseus, and then he abandoned her on the island, and she was heartbroken. And Dionysus came and said, "No, you're going to be mine."
I only
And
know who I only remember Ariadne from the thread because again Theseus used
yeah,
that to
yeah,
find his way out of
yeah,
the
yeah,
labyrinth when he and the labyrinth who was designed by Daedalus who later had a flying expedition with his son that didn't go so well.
didn't go.
So,
Yeah.
so that's amazing. So the Anatolian or Hittite might have led into the Greek, though I guess it's possibly impossible to know where what story came from first. But I guess the figurines, the archaeology, sort of tells the order of what came first.
I think, and well, I think the Greeks already would have had that as a Indo European inheritance, but they were very strongly influenced. And I don't want to jump the gun too much, but uh, the basic conflict is between the younger, earth-oriented, favoring humanity chief god, who we know as Zeus or Jupiter, um, Deus among the Vedic peoples. Uh, he probably is represented by the eagle, and that was a personified deity for the Hittites. Um, and his opposition to a father figure, maybe a dragon, maybe a personification of the sea, um, certainly the son of this cosmic celestial anti-mother figure.
So
And
we've seen this before, Tiamat, and
yes,
so
very, very, very much that same theme where
the
you have this
Enki Enlil conflict.
the what?
The Enki Enlil
Oh
conflict.
yes.
Yeah.
Um, well, Enki is the Lord of the Earth, but it's Enlil is the figure that basically identifies with the sea. He's the enemy of Baal, the hero god. And then it gets very confusing because there's these female figures, Asherah, his wife, but sometimes she sleeps with Baal, the sun. Um, she tries to destroy the sun at various points. Baal has a sister, uh, um, Anar, I think it's Anara, and she's kind of she could be likened to Artemis Diana to some
Is that
extent.
Inanna?
Inanna, yeah. Well, it's kind of Inanna, but it's also Inara, which is slightly different. They
I'm sorry.
all fuse.
Kevin, I'm not sure if you can do anything, but I hear an echo on my voice, and I don't know if everyone else can hear it too. Go on, sir.
Are we all right? Okay. I mean, so
You are.
it gets all right. It gets confusing because these figures get identified at one point with one other goddess, another point with another conflicting goddess, and so it is highly fluid, and we get that both through the Canaanite myths from Ugarit. We get it directly from the Mesopotamia, and the Hittites and the Hurrians transmit all that um, to the Hittites, and so you have basically there's a conflict between the sky god and the enemy god. And but Hesiod, in his theogony, he was strongly influenced by the Near Eastern Levantine succession myth. And so it's not just the hero god fighting the supposed father of God, dragon god, whatever. Um, it becomes Cronus fighting Uranus, and then Zeus overpowering Cronus, and it becomes a succession thing. And we've had that succession myth very strongly in the Levant, and
Indeed. And beyond.
and beyond. Yes,
That, I mean,
and
it's a
beyond.
very Indo European thing where there's sort of like grandparents who are not exactly involved, especially the father who's sort of like the sky or the water, and then you've got a son who's
Who
more
is the
involved, but then the grandson eventually usurps
that's
the.
not the Indo-European. That's the Levantine. That's called the succession myth, which Hesiod brings into Greece, and so we get that mythology of Uranus, Cronus, Zeus,
Well, the
and
Greek then moved into other Indo-European families anyway, and I mean, Norse has sort of a version of it. I mean, I know that also Marduk, sort of took over for his father, grandfather, and obviously the Egyptians are not Indo-European, so but Horus, sort of, sort of sharing space with Ra, but getting rid of battling Set is, I guess, his
well,
uncle,
would be his uncle.
his
Yeah,
father.
yeah, yeah. To avenge his father at least.
Yes,
But um,
his father's
all right,
Osiris. For anyone who's trying to follow along.
I mean, as I said, it is confusing and complex, and so, yes, maybe the land of a thousand gods does say it because you never know which god you're talking about. So you end up having one god is a multiple series of gods, and that does get rather complicated and confusing. You have among the Hittites, you have two spinstress goddesses. I don't know if I can pronounce their names, Ishtrishtiya and Papaya. They were basically Chthonian goddesses, underworld goddesses. I'm not really quite sure what their role was. They come in some of these disruptive rectification myths or the disappearance of the hero.
Well,
They try to.
crones are nothing new, so maybe they're a form of crones.
They probably are crones. Yes, yes. You have a more confusing uh, goddess of magic. She's the mother of the sea, um, Kam, Kamrushepa. She does appear in a ritual against paralysis, and in one myth, she actually frees nature, which had become bound. But she's probably basically another manifestation of this cosmic anti-mother, ultimately. Um, we have the sun god, of course, and we have the moon who fell from heaven myth that compares to the Sumerian tale of Inanna, who was the daughter of the moon. She descends to the underworld to become its queen, which is actually ruled by her sister, Ereshkigal, the death goddess. Inanna becomes released when her consort, Dumuzi, becomes her substitute.
I have to interject for a second because this is some of the people on Sports Jedi. This is partly a wrestling network, so you'll all appreciate it. I just had an exchange with Rosemary from TNA Wrestling about her resurrection of the bunny. Um, I can't remember her real name, but Allie. And I said she went through the seven gates, for her, and Rosemary got it. I'm like, yeah, and then I mean, Eresh Kagal had the last word, and I mean, I actually used this in the conversation with the wrestler. So, for those of you who are wrestling fans, if you think the mythology and knowing these things is useless, you're wrong. You might actually get a reaction from a wrestler who knows what the heck you're talking about because they're all weirdos too, just like me. Well, not just like me, but but some of them have shared interests with me. So anyway, hey, and Rosemary, if you listen, I'd love to have you on this on the show as well. So anyway, sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. All right. We have another Sumerian tale of Ninlil, who is the queen of the air, uh, being raped by who also becomes her husband, Enlil. And then she follows him to the netherworld. And in the netherworld, she gives birth to the moon god, who then ascends to heaven. And
Can we
this
talk
all
about for a
comes.
second how, like, I don't know if you have an answer for either of these things, but in all of these cosmologies, pantheons, mythologies, rape and incest seem to be okay. Um, and is there a basis for that other than because certainly the further back we go, a lot of the women are just as powerful or more powerful than their male counterparts. So it's not just the patriarchy. Um,
All right, let's go back to the fundamental Indo European myth. You
okay.
have the Gaia, you have the goddess, the earth goddess. She is the first of all beings. She has the power to give birth to her own corollary opposite, which is the sky god, the god of light, lightning, the weather god. And so that we know him as Zeus, we know him as Jupiter. Among the Hittites, he was known as the weather god. We have some possible names for him. He was Dias, ultimately among the Vedic peoples, becomes replaced by his more virile son Indra, who probably Indra's name is probably cognate with andros, meaning man, humanity. So, uh, and it's that humanity hero god fighting the dragon, subduing the dragon, which allows then the world order to be restored. what happens in most of these myths is that the weather god Zeus, Jupiter, um, he gets defeated at some point by uh, the Assyrian enemy, the anti-god. Um, Zeus gets his sinews stolen from Typhon, the dragon. The Hittite weather god loses his eyes and his heart to, I think, Iluyanka or the dragon. And he, I mean, these are gods. Gods can lose their hearts and their eyes and all that and still manage to, he marries a woman who's the daughter of a poor man. Maybe that poor man is the underworld god Pluto, and maybe it's a name for actually the god of wealth. Anyhow, he gives birth to a daughter, or no, he gives birth to a son, and the son then, when he grows up, he asks to marry the dragon's daughter, and in doing that for the dowry, he asks the dragon father for the eyes and the heart of his own father, who is then restored and then ultimately is able to conquer the dragon father. He has to kill his own son because the son is married into the family of the dragon, and the son says, "Kill me." Um, he may ultimately be a Dionysian figure and is resurrected, but that so many of the myths on the cuneiform tablets are incomplete. So we don't often have the endings of stories. We have,
A noble sacrifice
yeah,
repeats itself.
there's
I
two
mean,
versions.
arguably up until the Jesus.
Yep. Well, Jesus kind of synthesizes all of these dying, rising uh, figures, and but then claims to be the only one. And well, we know that story. I don't think we have to
Well, I
go
mean,
into.
you have to be the only one if you claim the origin of there are no other gods before me. So I mean, then he didn't say there wasn't going to be one after me that isn't my son. I mean, I'm not here to defend monotheism. I don't even think the monotheism has ever been a real thing. They just decide to change angels and demons into something that are not, you know, gods. But anyway, but but if you are a devout Christian and and want to and believe all that, then hey, I've just made it easy for you to follow along, and maybe this was the eternal truth all along. Just people didn't know what the eternal truth is because very few people read, or the priests were there. There's a welcoming. Everyone is welcome in the garden of thought, is what I'm trying to say. We can reconcile anything here. We're just trying to have a little fun and learn the history.
All right, let's go back. All right, so their chief god is the weather god. It's usually known as the weather god of Hatti. His name seems to be Teshup. That's the Hattian name. In Hittite, his name might have been Jashkapuna, but we don't really know because he's represented by a word sign, and these are ideograms, sumerograms, whatever they are, but they're just pictures. They're not words, so we don't really know how what the name was or how it was pronounced or anything like that.
So we
Um,
don't have a translation for whatever the written languages or characters are. We have no Rosetta Stone for these hieroglyphs or cuneiform.
in a way, we don't, but we have names from the Hurrians and the Hittites, and we know that the Hittites themselves use those names. And sometimes we have names among their own texts that we can decipher and presume that they are the names of these figures that they use word signs for primarily. But the spouse of the weather god is the sun goddess of Irina, and she's an underworld but terrestrial goddess, but she's also the sun. So she really covers the whole
Life
sequence.
cycle. Well, the sun
Yeah.
rises and the sun sets, so I guess there's a
Yeah.
logic to it.
Yes. Um, she could be likened to the goddess Hera, the wife of Zeus, whose name is probably cognate with the sun goddess or the dawn goddess among the Vedic peoples, Surya. Um, She's subsequently identified with the Hurrian Hebat, and she plays a very strong role in the Mesopotamian Kubaba cycle. Kubaba is again this enemy of the gods. The
And Hubaba's a giant, right?
Yes, or he's really a dragon type figure. He would correspond to the Syro-Canaanite El, the Mesopotamian Enlil, the air god, father of the gods, who
Oh,
brings about the world flood.
you know who I'm confusing with? The giant Humbaba in Gilgamesh.
Well, there is we have a giant in um, these Canaanite myths or whatever called Ubeli, Ubiluri, and he holds up the heavens and is on the earth. And the Kumarbi, who is the enemy and it has been defeated, he sires, according to the song of Ulikumuni, this diorite monster who's known as Ulikumi, and he is he's placed into the right shoulder of the world giant, who's holding up the heavens and the earth. The giant doesn't know; he just knows he has a pain in his right shoulder, and ultimately, the hero god, and this is part of their whole Hittite Hattic New Year's festival. It's a spring vernal festival called the Peruli. They use the same ultimate harpe or sickle thing that Cronus uses to castrate Uranus to cut the diorite monster out from the shoulder of the world giant. Um, and this Ulakamuni is both deaf and blind, so he doesn't know what's going on. You have you have two versions. You have the goddess Inari who seduces either Kumar, I guess it's Kumarbi, or no, it's Ulikumi. She invites him and his whole family, seduces him, gets him very, very drunk, and then she has a mortal lover who she gets him to tie them up when they're in this drunken state, and then hands them over to the weather god who can dispose of them. That's one version. And the other version is when Illuyanka deprives the weather god of his heart and eyes, and then his son then is the one that asks for those objects back when he marries
So honeypots are as old as time.
yeah. So I mean, and so in the first version, in Ari, I mean, she having this affair with Hupashi, the mortal hero who ties the monster up. But because he's already married, he's not really interested in her, and she goes into a peak of jealousy and kills him. Uh, we can only assume that he is returned to life subsequently, but like a Dionysian figure. But what also becomes confusing is that the Kumarbi Enlil figure, Enlil itself, and Baal are names that were used to signify Lord. And so they often use those same names for various deities when they were trying to identify them as the Lord.
Right, like Darth is in the Star
Yes,
Wars universe.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I get. I can also see, and listen, obviously I might be way out of school here and extrapolating, but I think that some of the myths maybe over time they sort of corrected for their hero god no longer getting killed upon rejection. You know, like Gilgamesh was able to reject Inanna. Um, I
Yes,
think she turned him into a wolf or something, but he didn't die. Hercules did some rejections, and he mostly turned out okay. I mean, he didn't at the end, but he too might have been resurrected, or died was killed in a horrible flaming pyre that he designed
but
himself.
then he is apostatized and accepted into Olympus.
Right. So it seems like some of the later myths found ways for their hero gods to not be killed, or they're semi-mortal or demigod heroes to not be killed. Now I don't know about pure mortals, and I'm not even sure if these people were demigods that were mortal. I think the demigods were mortal. Like I don't get the feeling that like Agamemnon or Odysseus were immortal. So they were just heroes, great warriors, and great men of renown and old.
Some of them become immortal, like Achilles and Helen, and and Hercules is hypothesized. Dionysus is a god who knows death, but is ultimately reborn. Um,
Are you looking
and
forward to the Odyssey movie? By the way, I know this is completely off the
uh,
beaten path.
yeah, I wanted. I've heard about it. I've heard negative things about it. That they're
Really
trying to do another one, and how successful it is seemed to be a little questionable. But
interesting. I mean, I would trust Christopher Nolan with pretty much anything, but
mhm,
I'm not excited about the cast. I mean, I know they're all very famous people, but none of them scream, Mediterranean to me.
yeah, yeah. No, I will definitely watch it when I can.
Maybe we'll do a review afterwards on the entertainment side of this network. Who knows?
Yeah,
I love when I make you laugh because it's not easy to make you laugh.
yeah. Oh, I laugh very easily. What do you
So you're saying
mean?
I'm just not funny?
Yeah, I mean you're nonstop.
uh, I've heard both those things before. Yeah,
You've heard that too. All right.
yes, I have.
So, all right, where are we now? Where do we want to go with all this?
Well, what led us to this was me asking about why is rape and incest seemingly okay.
Oh, all
So,
right. Yeah, I didn't finish that one. All right. So you have the mother goddess, Gaia, Prithivi, whatever her name is. She has the power to give birth to her male opposite, who becomes her spouse. So that's the luminescent sky and the earth mother. Their first child is the dawn goddess, and there is no other alternative. The father ultimately, there's two versions: either he rapes the daughter, or she's consensual, but they have an affair, and she gives birth. Who would be the child of the dawn goddess and the sky father?
the sun.
Yep, you got it. And
Right.
so there is this understanding of rape or extramarital affairs right at the very, very beginning of cosmogony. I mean that's the whole start of the whole shebang. Um,
So
the mother
since
goddess,
there were no choices, everything starts with a two or a
yeah,
one, but the one creates a man and a woman. It's not
and then there's
incest until like, but even in like the okay, so I think I told you that I'm listening to the great courses about the Old Testament. So what I did learn from that or relearn is that
mhm.
the Ten Commandments are not the only commandments. That there's like something like 703 commandments, and they're all supposed to be equally important, although that's arguable. But in any event, incest, there shall not be incest and there shall not be rape is not really in any of those, we and David sort of did a rape. So I mean, and that's like the house of David, Star of David, the bloodline of Jesus, if everything's to be believed, and if Dan Brown is to be believed, living there next to you in South France. But
All right,
so
let me interject right here. If you really want to get into the whole rape thing, what does Yahweh Jehovah do to Mary? He didn't ask her to give birth to his son.
this is true,
It's
and
a it's a it's
Zeus
a
was
it's a
very
rape.
rapey, but he was often rapey of human women. Um,
Yeah. Well, he had about 5 or 6 different wives before Hera, and the
I,
Earth Mother
I
gave
get
birth to
the
seven.
I get the gods mating with humans of their, whenever they want, because they're gods, and the rules don't apply to them unless they change rules amongst each other. I get the original point where there's no choice. I mean, that you start with two, so there's only two people, and they're related to each other some way or another, or figures. Though it continues, and I mean, I guess it's a very easy answer is to say they're gods, and no, and there is no such thing as incest amongst gods, because they don't have DNA. That's not the way gods work. There's no genetics. It's just godhood. It's something different. The rape is a little bit of a different story, but maybe that's just a easy way to tell a story.
You can think about a lot of women who gave birth that were unmarried. And so to say that then they were raped by the Sky Father, they gave birth, the child had a legitimacy that the child would probably not have had otherwise.
Light bulb over my head. Light bulb over my head. Just realized that this probably happened a lot in the real world, and a way to sort of legitimize it or explain it was that it was God that did it. The or goddess came in and did this. I didn't mean to. It wasn't my choice.
I mean, it is a most controversial image, and yet God's work on a different level, especially on a cosmogonic level, and they can the ethics that apply to us don't necessarily apply to them, and it's hard for a lot of people to understand that and accept that. But that's the mythology, and if you want to reject all that mythology, that's one course of action. But the mythologies are rich, and there's so many variants, and there's so much to discover through them. And I think they ultimately inform so much of our cultural centering and ultimately well-being. And through those myths, we understand that there are times when the whole world order is turned upside down. But the positive myth always then ultimately restores the original. The hero finally gets his courage back, or gets his heart and eyes back, or his sinews back, and he can go then conquer the monster, the enemy.
Right. Even poor Osiris, who was cut into 14 pieces, gets glued back together again, and is even given a golden penis. And while he then becomes god of the underworld. So yeah, he's on the underworld, but he's still a god. And the Egyptian underworld is not like the Christian version of hell, of fire and brimstone.
Right.
It's very much it's just a different place, with a lot of administration and bureaucracy. I have noticed that as the society gets more empire-like and structured and more bureaucratic, the pantheons seem to mirror that too. Like the Egyptian Book of the Dead, like they go through like a bunch of several different gods that have like special roles in the underworld. Now I know in plenty of religions that everything has a spirit, and there's a god for grass, there's a god for trees, there's a god for shrubs, there's a god for apples, whatever. So it's not really a far cry, but this is like, it's like a god for weighing your soul, a god for steering the canoe, a god for keeping the snakes away from the canoe, a god from deciding whether you should get off the canoe, God to decide whether or not you can get into the next underworld to then be judged by the other god, and then Anubis is there to weigh your scales, and then only then, if you pass all that, do you get to go to the land of Osiris. I mean, it's a lot of red tape, and I think the Babylonians actually probably did this first, or at least probably simultaneously somewhat with the Egyptians.
Yes, yeah, I think it's maybe just a little bit ahead of them, but they were simultaneous, basically.
Yeah, and those are our two original empires, which are multiple kingdoms under I don't think that's an accident. I mean, I doubt it's an original theory, but it is it's original to me. Um, but I don't know if it requires any scholarship or not. But if there's any PhD students out there, I don't know, look into it. Just come on the show and tell me what you come up with. And this is long-term booking. We're booking for the future. I want to clear one thing about Anatolia and the Hittites. So Anatolia clearly is not just Turkey. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Anatolia is sort of like the coastline, almost like from Croatia, Albania into Turkey, but also then sort of creeps up maybe along like where Georgia is and like sort of the Black Sea. Like I don't know if it goes quite to Ukraine or not, but who knows really?
I haven't heard that. I mean, Anatolia geographically is what we now know as Turkey.
Oh, okay. Is it
Um,
all of Turkey? Is it
yeah,
coastal Turkey?
yeah, yeah, all of it, all of it.
Okay. Well, that makes it simpler. See, you did simplify something.
Okay. And I mean, and so you had the Hittites, then they were replaced by the Phrygians. Um, then Rome conquered everything, of course. And then finally Byzantium became the Roman capital, at
The
least.
Greeks didn't like Alexander didn't conquer the Hittites
Oh,
before.
he does first. That's true.
Oh,
And but
okay,
in his wake, then you ultimately have the Romans
sure.
coming in and conquering a lot of what Egypt, at least, and the Levant, and
Yeah,
Anatolia, and Greece, and Northwest Europe,
I know that the
even Britain.
Hittites fancied themselves for a time to be a rival of the Egyptians, and then they heard about the army coming, and they're like, probably not a good idea.
Yeah, yeah.
Like we can work it out.
They seem to have had a practical side. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I think if we had a summary for the show, that they seem to have been quite practical, and you know, I mean, a lot of places aren't forgiving of religion, or at least that's what we think of in the ancient world. But it seems like they might have been more forgiving than, I mean, in some modern times, we seem to be less forgiving than they might have been then. Now we don't burn people at the stake and stone them so often, uh, but maybe that's
we still,
exaggerated too. I don't know.
yeah, we still seem to be doing things like that. I mean, uh, and we're destroying our whole planet ecologically. So, uh, and we don't seem to be able to stop it. We actually are a recreation of medieval feudal times, where you have a very, very powerful elite, very, very wealthy, and then the rest of us on more or less a peasant level, ineffectual. Um,
Yes, it's very depressing that I don't think that the fix was always in. I know there's people who have always thought that the fix was in, but just because they're early doesn't make them wrong. But if they were wrong then, I think they're right now. Um, there is just an entire industry, not economy, cross borders, that is just about moving money around and making money off moving money around and the money of others. And the short sightedness of it is that you need to have lots and lots and lots of people with money to be able to buy crap they don't really need. Um,
to
because
keep
at
it
some
all
point,
going.
yeah, I mean, I think the most telling thing is that Peter Thiel moved to Argentina. I mean, which, which has had this system of economic system for, I don't know, 50 years, 40 years, where it's basically basically oligarchs, basically Russian mafia state. 10% control everything, but really 1% control everything, and the other 9% sort of service the 1%, and then the rest of the people are sort of effed.
I think that's true. Now, in the Middle Ages, what ultimately ended that thing was the development of free market capitalism. I don't see how that's going to change things now, but my militant optimism thinks that our whole World Wide Web computer exchange globally, plus having to use AI as the goad for us getting our act together and ultimately becoming the instrument to change the prevailing world order on a more egalitarian
So you believe
basis.
the answer is in the technology. It's
Yeah,
not part of the problem. Well, that's nice.
I,
It's good to hear
yeah,
that.
it is part of the problem too. It's an ambivalent thing, but if we can communicate effectively globally, we can make it into a positive rather than the negative, rather than the climate change, the environmental degradation, nuclear weapons, who knows what else. Um, and I see it as this is technology. One of the Greek words for magic was techne. It's not the most common one, but it actually was a word they used for magic. And I think the magic of the World Wide Web and AI is probably our only ultimate recourse to rectifying and changing the deadlock situation that we are in right now.
Okay. So this has nothing to do with our original topic, but I think this is probably a lot of fun because so I mean, environmental catastrophe, just call it great flood coming or something that's, equally catastrophic, depending on, whatever the uh, collaboration of different catastrophes, that could exist. So that's one. So the interesting thing, so I can, so you think that the AI maybe will tell us that that's the situation. I don't trust that humanity will believe it or will still remain polarized. But I do think that if they're right about the power of AI, that it will take over, maybe to
We still
avoid the
have,
catastrophe.
yeah,
But I mean, I don't know that Ultron's
maybe
going to
it will
kill us,
take
but
over, but I
Ultron's going
think
to keep us.
we have
Ultron's
to
going to
engineer
subjugate
it.
us.
We have to engineer it, and we have to ultimately bequeath an ethical standard to AI. So maybe it will be more powerful than we are. But if we can collectively, not through people like Musk and Zuckerberg and you name them,
But what
uh,
about the guy from Anthropic? He at least seems to be taking stands in that vein, but
we need people like that. But we have to all work together. And if they don't conform to what we know it has to be, then we marginalize them.
I'm very worried about AI amongst a lot of things I'm worried about. I become less worried about them because I figure by the time these things are really problems, there's a good chance I'll be dead. Um, but I do have
Yeah, yeah.
children, and I do have some, can care about people who won't be dead and future and all that. In some esoteric or thought process. Um, so I hope that you're right. I hope that the AI will be something that says, "Dummies, get your acts together." And when it's computers, they're saying that enough people, or at least enough people in power, will be. Because I am I've read Yuval Noah Harari, and I've read I know what happened before capitalism. I know that the world was 90% of poverty and 10% of, and that capitalism basically reversed that equation. But this unfettered capitalism that we have now is not quite reversing again, but it's definitely the difference between the haves and the kind of haves and the it's like the middle class and below is so far removed from the upper class that it's not quite haves and haves nots, at least not in the US, but it feels like that to those of us who have lived in sort of a more balanced economy. That's probably the same in Europe.
there is a middle between the haves and the have-nots, and that's the service class,
Right.
and they're the waiters and who keep the whole mechanism running for the haves. Uh, they're not have-nots because they get something that keeps them at least alive. But
Right. You'd go to the waiters. I go to the bodyguards, the private military contractors.
that too, yes, that's
But there's lawyers, there's plastic
they're almost
surgeons.
halves because they're paid rather well by the elite to be able to for them to defend the elite, and and the waiters and bartenders and all that, they're not paid that well, but they're paid enough that they can survive in the system. At least they have jobs, they have accommodation, uh, and so
Well, if
forth.
they're serving the haves, they're going to get nice tips that make them feel close enough to the haves. And since tips are not entirely recorded, it's worth 30 or 40% more than just a dollar on your paycheck.
But even the have-nots now all seem to have mobile phones, if not computers as well. So everybody seems to be within this World Wide Web to some extent or another.
This is true. Yeah. And I mean, one of the few things Elon's done, which is good, but I mean, he's shown how he can change switches and use it as extortion or for evil purposes. But Starlink has made the internet available in a lot of places it
Yeah,
wasn't before. Now he has
yeah.
absolute control over that, which is a little bit scary. I mean, it's sort of the good Lord taketh, giveth, and the good Lord taketh away. And in this case, it's sort of a man child on ketamine that has 12 children with 12 different women. I mean, talk about biblical, trying to start your own 12 tribes. I mean,
I
that can't be a
mean,
coincidence. I mean, when you're a trillionaire, you don't stop at 12 unless you're trying to make a point.
I mean, it is fascinating. And what may you live in interesting times? Is that the ultimate Chinese curse?
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we
Uh,
certainly are doing that.
we are indeed. How do we get ourselves back to the path of the Hittites and the land of 1,000 gods, or have we tilled that soil?
I think we've tilled it. I think we have to recognize how influential the Hittites were for Greco, ultimately Roman culture, uh, which is fundamental to the West. Um, how they fit and are part of the Indo European speaking peoples. And the Indo Europeans are basically half of our global population. It's the largest single linguistic family. So to uncover our proto myths, our proto rituals, our proto understandings of cosmogony and so forth, the Hittites play an important role in that. But that's where we're at in trying to refine and restore the positiveness. I think for me the Indo-Europeans were very much akin to the Greek kind of exemplified them the most ideally in that positive consideration of humanity, that positive hope, and seeing things as a plus rather than as a negative and as a burden. Uh, we lost it in the West when with the ultimate predominance of Christianity and the overturning of the pagan pantheons. But even within the Roman Catholic Church, it's so, at least here in France, it's so blatantly pagan, and a lot of the gods become the saints. So
Right.
they're there. You have to uncover it, but it's there. And there's an earthiness to the way, at least, the Roman Catholic functions on the more uh, mundane, provincial, local levels.
And the Roman Catholic is the biggest. it might be the oldest, and I only say might because from day one there were sects that probably didn't necessarily consider themselves Christian at the time. They probably thought they were Jewish or followers of Jesus or whatever. So
or
I
not.
you know, but let's just go that they're the oldest. But there's something between like 35 and 40,000 different denominations of Christianity. So even within Christianity, there's so much. I mean, that's
That
a small
that's a
city.
very that's a basic feature of Abrahamic religion, and they have personified and adored this anti-divine figure who says, "I'm the only one." I mean, it sounds like our present occupant of the Oval Office, but um, and yet by focusing on such a divisive, chaotic, pre-cosmic figure, and it's transcendent. It's not of this world. It's other than this world. It precedes this world, apparently. And the only thing that precedes this world would be chaos. And its divisiveness you see in all the three. You see that even in Judaism, but you see especially in Christianity how it is divided between Roman Catholics, Orthodox, Protestants, and then every kind of Protestant. And you see the same thing between the Sunni and the Shia divisions of Islam, um, and the Sufi come in there at some point. There's something. It's the nature of that particular kind of theological fixation that is divisive and splinters.
Well, it's probably something in our nature about competition for resources, and it's probably supposed to be a method of population control to have balance on the planet, which we're just smart enough to and adaptable enough to overcome that, which of course leads to our cockroach-like expansion everywhere and being a danger to the planet. Now, of course, us being a danger to the planet is only temporary. The planet will recover.
That
It's
will survive.
it,
Yeah.
it's pretty much us and every and most other living creatures that will suffer for it. But other living creatures, or some of them will. I mean, who whatever's living at the bottom of the sea in those trenches probably is completely nonplussed by this. The Atlanteans, they don't care. Um,
And
so
the octopus.
I hope that I hope the octopuses survive, and I hope they
They
claim their
prove the
inheritance.
civilization. Yeah.
Yes, I'm willing to serve our cephalopod lords, overlords. I'm ready for you, fellows. I think I'll understand your colors and emotions,
But
just
all
just
right, but
fine.
the difference between our pagan past and this Abrahamic takeover of the planet um, is that, like the Hittites and the Romans, they could identify diverse. That first of all, they were pluralistic and diverse, and they could see the identities or make identities between different components. And so it was accepting. It wasn't rejecting, which is what the Abrahamic position is. And so it. I say ultimately, if it is to the degree that we can reclaim that part of our heritage, and I think the Hittites have an important role to play in that, as well as the Romans, um, that we may be able to restore a sane and ecologically balanced future for our planet.
Well, I
We may
think
not
that's
make it.
probably. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We may not make it, but I think there is that possibility there, and that's what I'm rooting for.
I think that's probably a good place for us to leave it on
And,
a note of optimism. I think we covered the Hittites and certainly a whole lot more in the ancient world right up until now, and we even did a little bit of transhumanism and a little dystopia. So I mean, we've covered many of the branches and the roots of the Garden of Thought, as we're wont to do. Um, as far as your appearances on the show, was this about par, more painful, less painful?
not painful, no. On par, maybe more fun.
All right, great. Okay, excellent. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. All right, well,
I
you know me.
I
I'll come up with something or somethings, in a few weeks and shoot you an email, and you can pick what that is. But for the time being, um, if you want to be found and followed, I know you're not really a social media person, but you do exist, and I know that you have books and stuff. So if you want to talk about any of that, this is a great time.
oh right. My seminal book is called The Divine versus the Assyrian, an Indo European interpretation of cult and myth. Um, and that's where I really lay out everything. I did a book called Pagan Theology, which really explains what the pagan religions were, what the pagan elements are in other religions, and what the ultimate purpose or goal of a pagan theology would amount to. And I've done my own autobiography, which is called Matter Matters, and they're all available somewhere. But
Somewhere, Amazon
yeah,
maybe.
Amazon, yes, I think so, and some of the leading book chains. I think you can order it through them.
How is your feud with Michael York, the actor, going?
We don't have a feud. We don't have any contact. He's not very well. I just know that.
So you're
Um,
winning. Okay.
yeah, I guess at that point. But if you look up,
Gallows
if
humor.
you,
Sorry, everyone.
I know if you want to get me instead of him, you have to say Michael York Pagan.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to get everything that he's recorded. And
Right. You're going to get the Three Musketeers, the Four Musketeers,
yeah,
Logan's Run,
yeah,
Austin
yeah,
Powers. Yeah.
Cabaret or whatever it was, and
Oh my goodness. Yes, I forgot about that.
yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So now, folks, here's so. First of all, thank everyone who joined us live. I can only see the YouTube aspect of it on the Sports Jedi Network. For those of you listening on the download, you're hearing new things, but you're not seeing new things. But you can subscribe to the Sports Jedi Network. They're not just on YouTube; they're also on X, and I believe other platform. I know other platforms as well. I just I'm not smart enough to say which ones. I don't even know what they are. I think one is Twitch, but that's all right. For those of you who thought you were coming in 1 o'clock live, that's entirely my fault. I'm sorry. Um, there's also a show that I did last week that is not published yet, which is with my former partner from the Evolve podcast, White Chocolate, where we did cover Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And I think I took him by surprise in some of the directions I went, but he rolled with it really well, and it was a fun show. And I think from now on, this show will be simulcast. It'll be live and streamed, but I believe the audio will remain the same as well on all your audio platforms. So if you just prefer to listen and not look, you can find it on. You can certainly listen on Sports Jedi. You can listen on at Garden of Thought Pod on YouTube or on Apple, Spreaker, Spotify, Podbean, and any place on the Wrestling Soup Network as well. And I thank everyone who's been along the ride. This is the next step in the journey. Probably should have done this 6 years ago, but no one's ever said that I'm the brightest bulb in the house, and that's why I have professors coming on who are the brightest bulbs in the house to entertain me and keep me straight. So the next show you might hear after this is maybe the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory one, but that will be just audio. Wednesday, I'm scheduled to speak with someone on symbology. And next week, returning guest who's also a lawyer and a poet and an author, Jennifer Sutherland, on Greek mythology, but especially with regards to the plays. So that should be a lot of fun. Thank you, Michael, for being here again and indulging me on all of that. Thank you, Chris Matthews, for coming in and saying good show. Appreciate it. Thank you, Rams fan, for being here. I'm very pleased to see this. I'm not quite used to keeping up with the chat yet without someone else helping. Anyway, thank you so much, Professor York. Thanks everyone for playing along, and hope that you subscribe and like and subscribe to the show in one format or another, but definitely give us a subscribe to the Sports Jedi and to Wrestling Soup, because Sports Jedi is quickly becoming my dear friends, and Wrestling Soup have been my dear cyber friends as long as I can remember. And of course, right here on the Sports Jedi Network, the second episode of the MLW reviews with my best friend, Mr. Thomas, former MLW wrestler, future wrestler, maybe. Will be live 6:05 Monday, and we've got 3 hours of MLW to cover for you. So anyway, follow me on the X at @dose_evil. You can find all my stuff, and you can follow me on Facebook too, Jeff Lippman. It's fine. No more secret identity. All right, end of the show. Professor, thanks again.
Thank you, Jeff.